Hey, what's up, guys? You're listening to the It Takes a Village podcast. I'm Ashley, your host. This is where the struggles are real, the callings are heavy, the kids are sticky. We come together because it takes a village, and this is your tribe. Hey, everybody. I'm super excited for this episode today. I have a guest who is like the guest to talk to you about this. I feel really special that you chose to be on our podcast today. But our guest is Pattie Fitzgerald. She is the founder of Safely Ever After, nationally recognized as a leading expert in the field of childhood sexual abuse prevention and education, and also child abduction prevention and internet safety education, which maybe that has to be a whole nother episode because I didn't even think about that. And then a former Montessori preschool teacher, which that is awesome because my kids are in Montessori school right now. So anyway, so I have that love and that connection with you there. And then mama, of course, an advocate of educating of children and educating parents and safety and like all the things. You've been in all the places and you've met all the people that I want to meet. So Pattie, welcome to the show. Thank you for being on.
Hi, thanks, Ashley. Thanks for having me.
So I immediately, when I was thinking about having this conversation with you, I was thinking about how I grew up and how different somehow my parenting is to that. Like when I grew up, it was all about, stranger danger. And my parents like literally maybe told me that one time. And then it was always like, oh, here's my friend from so-and-so, give him a hug. Or like, there was nothing.
Yeah, there was nothing. There was nothing that was actually meaningful and effective because people weren't talking about it. They were just talking about stranger danger, and that's not the biggest threat to kids. So that's why I created Safely Ever After, so that we could finally start talking about it in the right way and actually serving our kids.
Right. And it's crazy because when I was reading through your site, it was saying, and I've read this statistic in other places, is that like 90% of this, and we all know this too because we see it in the news, it's never, or most likely it's never some random stranger on the street that this happens to. Maybe that does happen, like, 1 in a million or, whatever, but it's mostly somebody we know or somebody that we had a connection to, like, somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. And that's what's scary.
Yeah, it's in the familiar circle. 90% of the time, it's someone that you know, and 35% of the time, it is a family member. So what I call that Uncle Creepy and Cousin Yucky, or Coach Sandusky, or your sister's new boyfriend, or the next door neighbor who's always volunteering to take your kid off your hands for no good reason. So yeah, those are the people that are the perpetrators. And that is hard as a parent. That's a hard statistic to wrap your head around because it makes you think you can't trust anybody.
Yeah.
And that's not true. So Safely Ever After, when I do a parent talk, is really all about how to recognize the grooming tricks or the red flag warning signs so that you can figure out who I should trust, who I shouldn't trust, and how far to trust that person, like what are the boundaries in the relationship that certain people have with my child, and how to make those judgment calls for yourself. So
yeah, I want to uncover some of those, like what are the red flags? And for some of us who don't know, like what is grooming? What is that?
Yeah. So grooming it's that preliminary setup. It's the charm, the extra attention, the offering to do you favors, freebies that allow alone time with your child. So grooming is basically, what it means is if someone is a predator, they have to get you eating out of the palm of their hand before they ask for access or alone time with your kid. And so grooming means the setup to the con game.
Yeah.
And when you know what the grooming tricks are, you can stop the con game before it actually goes further into victimizing your child.
So they're working on the parents this whole time.
Yeah, they work on the kids too, but a lot of times it's grooming the parents because you're the gatekeeper. You're the one who's going to allow alone time. That's why I say it's really a parent's job to keep their children safe by minimizing certain possibilities or opportunities.
Yeah, I think this is what's scary, or what the moms I know struggle with the most, is that they can't find the balance of, because of this, because it's, it's, you don't know who it can be and everybody's so cautious and stuff, is balancing that cautiousness and also giving your child freedom and independence. How can we do that without stressing the entire time? I don't know if that's possible.
That's a big question. That's going to take a lot of answering. So interrupt me anytime you need to, because I've got a lot to say about that. The first thing is most people are not child molesters. So you do have to start from a positive perspective and not immediately think everybody's out to get me and my child. Okay. So you don't want to overanalyze. You don't want to overthink this. That's the first thing. Let's try and breathe and stay calm. And I'm a mom too. I know that's easier said than done. I know that. But we do want to understand how predators work. And there are red flag warning signs in their behaviors. And that's why I use the term tricky people. For example, if my daughter, I talk about her a lot, if my daughter, if her grandmother says to me, Pattie, I want to take Marissa to the movies because she finally got an A on her math test, and we don't want you to come because I want to spoil her rotten and make it a special day, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. If my best friend says, we want to take Marissa to the movies with our family, it's something you don't have to come to, and I know your family and my daughter hangs out with your kid, that makes sense. What doesn't make sense is when her math tutor or her soccer coach or somebody who typically wouldn't do that with your child comes to you and says, your kid's so great. She got an A in math and I want to reward her with a movie date on Saturday. And we don't want you to come because it's a special thing. That doesn't make sense. So one of the first things I tell parents is ask yourself, does this make sense?
Yeah.
I had a really interesting client call me over the weekend about a babysitter, and she was at a party and there were a lot of people she didn't know, and somebody overheard that she needed a babysitter or a new nanny, and it was a gentleman who was all dressed up in a suit and tie, and he didn't have any knowledge of her or her family, and he overheard her and he said, hey, I'm a babysitter. And then he proceeded to show her a bunch of pictures of kids on his phone, not even kids that he was with. Just look at these kids. I'm so kid friendly.
Oh, wow.
And she immediately got that, what I call that uh-oh feeling. She said to herself, that doesn't make sense. And her husband said to her, oh, let's not go there. Let's be open-minded and let's give the guy a chance. And I asked me about it and I said, absolutely not. That kind of thing is what I call a 50-50 bet or 50-50 odds. And so that's when I say, does this make sense?
Yeah.
Am I making the smartest decision on who should be babysitting my kids?
Right. I'd rather not toss the dice in that situation and see.
Exactly. So for grooming, that's one way to be very charming and look super kid friendly. And predators do this thing where they look for a weak link in your family system and then jump in to fill a role. So I'm always looking for somebody who's jumping in to save the day for me and relieve me of a parental duty. Does that make sense? Is it the soccer coach who last week gave my daughter a $200 pair of sneakers and this week says, I can give her a ride home because you're so busy, Pattie? That's grooming. And when you know what to look for, you can stop it. With family members, I always refer to my big Italian family in New York. Do what I do, and that is a personal inventory. Who are the relatives? Are they excessively physical to a point where it's odd or seems overdone? I don't mean grandma, wanting to
Right.
squeeze your kid's cheek, but is there somebody who is constantly seeking out the kids for hugs and tickles and lap sitting and wrestling, and they don't seem to stop, or it seems excessive? those kinds of warning signs, whether it's an older child with your kid or an adult with your kid, that's when at Thanksgiving dinner you say, where's my kid and where's that person? And I'm going to make sure that they're not upstairs behind a closed door. I'm going to make sure it's always an observable environment when when I've got all these relatives around and my kid is, 5, 6, 7 years old and really not able to discern for themselves what's okay and not okay. So
I feel like those are the instances that we probably need to step up our game where we feel the safest. Like,
yep.
when you're at a family event and you're enjoying, visiting your relatives and then the kids are all running around doing their own thing. But then for me, that makes me a little nervous.
Yeah. Well, it makes a lot of people nervous, and you can still enjoy your relatives. You can still sit at the kitchen table while the kids are running around, and you can have your glass of wine or your coffee. But for me, what I always did was a little check-in every now and then. So if I'm at the kitchen table, yeah, I'm feeling safe and secure, but every now and then I do have to get up and check, where are the kids? Are they in the living room? Are they all watching a movie together? Are there any adults in there who really don't need to be watching the Paw Patrol movie?
Yeah.
Because they're an adult and they should be in the kitchen having coffee or wine and conversation with us. So every now and then I just do a little check-in. Where are the kids? Where's everybody else? I don't like closed doors. Bedroom doors closed with the kids. So I'll often, if I have to go upstairs and open the door and just say, hey, kids, we do open doors, or pop in, that's a deterrent and that kind of thing. So, you just have to get up every now and then.
Yeah. And so I noticed you use the word or the label tricky people instead of stranger danger. Is there a reason that you've switched those terms or is yeah, I just
big reason. Big reason. Huge reason. And you mentioned it right in the beginning. It's really not a stranger that poses the
yeah, I guess that's
biggest
true.
threat. So that's one reason. Most of the time it's somebody who tries some kind of a trick with you or the child. Those grooming tricks, those red flag tricks. So you can't tell who's tricky just by looking at them or thinking they're somebody I know or I don't know. It's not what somebody looks like. It's what they say or what they want to do with your kid. That's why tricky people is important for parents to understand. And the reason I teach kids about tricky people is because, for one thing, they don't like the idea of being tricked. So it makes them feel very important that they can spot a trick or what I call a thumbs down person. And so I like to teach kids some certain safety rules or what I call thumbs up and thumbs down rules for kids. And if somebody is breaking a rule, then they're thumbs down today. They're a tricky person. And it takes that element of stranger out of the equation.
Yeah.
Because, kids think a stranger is going to look weird or seem dangerous. So even if there is a stranger at the park who does want to engage with a child, they're going to be friendly. They may even say, hi, Ashley, my name is Mrs. Baloney, and I've got this really fun thing over here to show you. And so your kid their stranger danger doesn't even go off. That stranger danger radar doesn't kick in because Mrs. Baloney's real friendly and she said her name, and why wouldn't I go there? So
Yeah.
I want kids to learn about tricky people and some do's and don'ts for when they're with people they know and people they kind of know.
Yeah, I think stranger danger is very limiting because now that I'm thinking about it, like at the park, my kids are like, especially when it comes to other kids, they can't, I'm trying to tell them stranger danger as far as like adults and, all these things. And then they're like, well, that kid over there is a stranger, but I want to play with him. So, and some, okay.
No. And what's a great thing in that scenario, Ashley, is if your kid does say, Mom, that's a stranger, but I want to go play with him. The response should be, wow, thanks so much for asking first. I think that's thumbs up. And you might even walk your child over to that that other child and check out and see who their safe adult is or whatever. But it's great when a kid asks first or checks in or just double checks about something. The first thing you always say is, wow, I'm so glad you did that. Let's check it out together.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something earlier that I'm getting into because my daughter is now the age of the sleepovers, which I know you talk about a lot. And that, I think that is another one of, I can control, I feel like I can control the situation when I'm around, and I can do all the checking and, all these things. But when I put her in somebody else's hands, then I'm, all night I'm like, I hope that they're making the right, I hope that they're checking in on them.
Yep. So yeah, and I have a daughter. We went through the whole sleepover phase too. She's 21 now, but we did all this, and I remember it really well. So I have a couple of different perspectives. First of all, I think you're right to be a little leery or concerned about sleepovers because they can be a slippery slope. You're not there. There could be older kids, older siblings. Their friends might be sleeping over. Are there out of town guests who are visiting? Is it a parent party that night and your kid is sleeping over with her friend, but there's a bunch of other people around? So I think there's a checklist to just sort of run through. If you're going to allow sleepovers, you can either say we don't do them at all, which makes life very simple, or we only do sleepovers at my house, which after about 3 of those, you're going to be exhausted.
I know. That's the route I was thinking of taking, but yeah.
It's exhausting, but that's okay. But you can do that. But the other thing is, and this is what I did with my own daughter, if you want to allow a sleepover, I think you have to keep it a very short list of approved houses. And this is a conversation that you tell your kid. And I go through the whole checklist. There are no kids in that household who are 4 years older or more than my child. So if my child is 7, I don't want my kid at a sleepover where there are a bunch of 12, 13, 14-year-old kids, because those kids are in a different mindset and they're in a different developmental phase in terms of even their sexuality and what they think is okay or not okay. They're not trying to be a molester, but sometimes they can be inappropriate out of their own curiosity. So I have a checklist. I don't want a sleepover where there are much older kids. I ask myself if there's any substance abuse or if this is just a partying type of family. Is this a family that likes to have a lot of people over on the weekends? I might do a play date on a Thursday afternoon there, but not a sleepover on Friday night. I ask myself, is this a single family, or I'm sorry, a single parent who's got way too many new partners or girlfriends or boyfriends that she's always introducing to her own children, because that can be a very risky environment. I ask myself if I've actually taught my child how to put their stop sign hand out and say, stop touching me like that, if they're getting what I call the uh-oh touch or an uh-oh touch, or if they're just uncomfortable. Does my child know how to reach me if she decides she wants to come home? Is there a landline in that household? Is there a cell phone? Have I actually showed my daughter how to use the cell phone, mention to the parent ahead of time that Marissa always has permission to call me. Where's your cell phone going to be? So I have to line up all my ducks in a row. It is not necessarily a bad thing to do sleepovers, but I always say keep it a very short list. People that you've known forever. That you've been in their house. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. I was going to say, and I guess from what I'm hearing also, it makes sense to wait until your child can access you. Like if you can't send your 6-year-old over there because they don't know how to use the phone or how to call somebody if something's happening or...
Right. Or they might just be too afraid to, or too, sort of nervous to call you up in the middle of it. So, have I taught my child how to do that, and that it's okay to do that at midnight if all of a sudden she wants to come home? I ask myself, is there anything or anyone in that household who's ever said it or done anything that made me feel uncomfortable? So for me, Marissa was allowed sleepovers at 3 households when she was growing up. I had known the parents since I think pre-K or kindergarten early on. I had been in their house numerous times. I knew what their parenting style was like, and that's important. And there weren't older kids in the family that I thought were going to be a little frisky or risky. So for Marissa, she did get sleepovers, but she had sleepovers at her friend Olivia's, her friend Emily's, and her friend Julianne. And everybody else, I just said to Marissa, I don't feel real comfortable when you're sleeping out. So I just want to have those other kids sleep at our house. And, as she got a little bit older, I could expand on conversations. But when she was very young, that's what I did.
Yeah. That seems pretty reasonable until they complain about, well, Mom, everybody else is having a sleepover here.
I know. That's a tough one. You got to do a lot of due diligence or investigation. If Marissa's invited to a sleepover party, who's going to be babysitting? Is there a nanny tonight or is it the parents? What do I know about the parents? Are there parents that know those people better than I do? So can I call up Ashley and say, hey, there's a sleepover at Emily's house for her birthday. What's the deal? I don't know Emily's family real well. Give me your take on everything. I may even call Emily's mom and say, this is probably going to just be a one-off because I don't really like sleepovers. I'm uncomfortable, and just ask Emily's mom a few questions ahead of time.
Yeah.
Get a feeling for what she's like or what the whole environment's going to be like.
Yeah, my kids don't stand a chance. I played all those tricks of Mom. But of course, my mom didn't do the due diligence of calling the parent to see if what I was saying was true. But I'd be like, Mom, I'm going to Stephanie's house. We're having an all-girl sleepover. We're going to watch movies. And then I'd really be at like Sarah's house and it was a boy-girl sleepover. And, Mom had different parenting roles than I did. And so like now I think back and I'm like, gosh, what was my mom thinking? I would like,
sneaky kid.
Yes, I know. So now I know all the rules though. So I'm like, my kids, I'm like, don't even try it with me. Everybody's coming over here because I know what you guys are really trying to do. But is there an age that is too early to start talking about this? Because I think, with all these things happening in the news, the conversations that I've caught myself having or thinking about having with my kids, I'm like, this is crazy. Or I feel like maybe it's too soon, but at the same time, I want them to know versus it be too late and me not because I didn't ever have the conversation.
Right. And you're smart, Ashley, because predators have said they know exactly which kids have been talked to a little bit about appropriate or inappropriate behavior. And they know which kids are kind of in the dark because they watch kids, they watch family dynamics, and they're very specific about who they're going to choose to try and groom or target. So you're smart. But what I think is important is that we don't try and teach our kid everything all at once. Baby steps. So when your child's about 4 years old, start teaching them what I call the 4 top safety rules. They're on my website. They're on these postcards that I have. They're in my books. The first thing is teaching your child they're the boss of their bodies. Kids love that term. So teach them they're the boss of their body, and that means they're the boss of really who can touch them and who can't touch them. They're the boss of their private parts, and use the words penis, vagina with your child. And teach them that nobody except mom or dad helping you stay clean or the doctor checking you to be healthy. Those are the only people who are allowed to be around your penis or vagina.
Yeah.
And everybody else, that's a no touch. Teach your kid the no secrets about my body, no secrets about my private parts or my body. And teach your kid the check first rule. So at around 4 years old, you can go over those 4 concepts: boss of my body, boss of my private parts, no secrets, ask first or check first. And those are the things that you start with, and then you build on them as your child grows.
Right. Yeah, we're not trying to freak them out the gate.
Yeah, and the other thing is, it's such a scary topic that parents often approach it with a tone that's very dark or intense or scary, or, hey, this is really important, you got to learn about this stuff. And kids will tune you out, or just get really freaked out, and then they can't process information. So part of Safely Ever After's approach is to be very warm and nurturing and empower your kids with a tone that says, you're so smart, you're going to be the boss of your body, we're going to learn our safety rules because you're so important. And the tone of making it sound just like anything else you're trying to teach your kid is really what helps your child retain the information and empowers them instead of scares the heck out of them.
Yeah. And I think it's great that you've provided 2 resources for us, because having these conversations is really hard, especially if you haven't, like, if your parents didn't example that for you. I know for myself, I've had to do research of, like, how do I even bring this up and make it not scary? What should I say? And those are, you have 2 books on Amazon. One is No Trespassing, This Is My Body. And then the other one is Super Duper Safety School, Safety Rules for Kids and Grownups. And I like reading those together as a family. Would that be a good way of like engaging in that conversation in an easy way to where parents don't have to start sweating, like about, dads are like, what do I say?
Absolutely. Because they're basically scripts so that you don't have to think about what to say. No Trespassing is for kids starting around 3 years old up to 8 years old. And it's really about your private parts and thumbs up and thumbs down touches, and how you have the right to say no to any kind of a thumbs down touch, even if it's just a squeeze on the cheek or a hug that you don't want. And you can read that all in one setting. Super Duper Safety School takes my safety rules and scripts them out 1 rule per page. You don't have to read both of these to your kids right away. Super Duper Safety Schools for kids that are in about kindergarten up to 4th grade. And you would read like maybe 1 page a week, 1 rule a week. But you don't need to do everything all at once.
Yeah.
And you did mention, just really quickly so I don't forget, that thing about hug your grandmother, hug your grandfather, kiss your aunt, kiss your uncle. Don't force kids to be physical on someone else's terms. If they don't want to hug or kiss grandma, just let your kid give a different sign of attention and affection. They can high five, and you can say to your kid, it's okay, you can high five grandma today, or use your words, or give a quick hug if you want. And just tell grandma, we're practicing her being the boss of her body. Don't take it personally, grandma. She's just practicing right now. Wow. That's how I handle that. I think that one's important, especially for little kids.
Yeah. I think that that is probably another conversation of how to let your family know that these are your guidelines, even if they weren't their guidelines. Because sometimes, when we introduce new things to grandma or grandpa, they're like offended that we would even, but at the same time, like, because you didn't, look what right. I had to do.
I may have dodged a few bullets and maybe not when I was growing up because of how they talked or didn't talk. So I just would say to my own mom, I know you think it's crazy, but we're just trying to keep her safe in a different way. And sometimes I would even use this with my mom. I really need your help teaching her how to be safe with other people. So she's going to practice being the boss of her body with you. I'm just letting you know ahead of time. And then that approach was more acceptable to grandma, because it wasn't a personal thing. Like, she doesn't have to hug you if she doesn't want to.
Yeah.
And you did it all wrong when I was growing up. So you got to get your grandma's buy-in, she's got to get on the same page. So.
Hey guys, I hope you've enjoyed this episode so far with Pattie Fitzgerald and teaching our kids how to be safe from predators. You guys, this is just part 1. Part 2, I did a Q&A with Pattie. I asked you guys some, if you had some questions for her, and I picked a few of them, I think 3. And so if you listen to the second part of this, you can hear those specific questions and then her specific advice to those questions that hopefully maybe will be helpful to you guys and some of the concerns you have with your kiddos. So tune in. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Don't forget to share it for mamas who might need this. I mean, just to keep our kiddos safe, So hope you guys continue sharing, continue listening, and catch the second part of this episode for the Q&A from you guys.